All right. We are recording. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another live recording of the Managing Partners podcast. I'm Kevin Daisy, your host, also the founder of Array Digital. We exist to help law firms grow their practice through digital marketing. So if you need that kind of help, please reach out. Today, I have a really awesome guest, special guest, actually coming live out of St. Petersburg in Russia today. Owns a practice based out of Panama. So he's got a really cool story. I'm really interested to get talking with him and have you guys learn more about what he's up to. So Evgeny, welcome to the
Kevin,
podcast.
hi.
Thanks for coming on.
Very good to meet you, Kevin, and thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Yes, sir. So Evgeny and I have had a little bit of chance to talk backstage here before recording. He is in St. Petersburg at the moment. And what time is it there, Evgeny?
It's about 5:30 now.
5:30. So we're just getting started here. It's 10:30 in Virginia in the U.S. And so he's at the end of his day there. But so Evgeny, tell us. You have a unique story already, a background, but start us out from kind of where you're from and where you grew up, and we'll kind of get more into what you're up to now and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, it's been a long journey with lots of interesting steps in the way. But I was born in Moscow, and I emigrated as essentially a refugee from Moscow because the family was Jewish, and in the 70s there was an opportunity for them to escape the communist regime legally. So a lot left. We were among the first. My dad was a plastic surgeon, medical family. We immigrated. I grew up essentially in Australia, got my education there. And then in the 90s, I went back to Russia, started one of the biggest law firms in the Far East, was involved in investment in shipping and oil and gas and all those areas. Then went in different parts of the world, including eventually the islands in Fiji and Vanuatu, where I worked with the passport program. We created, actually my friend Stefan Mandel created the first Vanuatan passport program with the government. He changed the law. He actually won the lottery 22 times using a Fibonacci code to win that. And he was, so he's a bit of a maverick, a very interesting guy. And there we started with one of the world's, actually one of Hong Kong's wealthiest people, the concept of what we call a future city or a private city. And then that didn't go ahead because the government changed. So then after various adventures, because one of my passions was basically human rights law and structuring and trust law, although that sounds a bit contradictory, but the two, I very much was a passionate believer of Ayn Rand, which is, what they call quite wrongly, the anarcho-capitalist movement, which is basically the minimal involvement of government in human life. Because of that, I've been involved in litigation against governments in many ways, and have had a lot of experience in that field, a lot of it negative, what governments can do to you, and have also protected many of my clients and advised them when they get attacked. So I decided, or have been part of what we call the Plan B movement, which is the movement to structure yourself to minimize your interaction with all sorts of nasty creatures like predators and governments and ex-spouses and etc. And that has been the concept has been the creation of what we call a family office program, which is the structuring of your own complete family office system. And then I wrote a book which, under a nom de plume because it's controversial.
You said that. That's very interesting.
That book is called Avoiding Death and Taxes. It's on Amazon. It's talks about the basically from my own experiences with very powerful clients who are not named in the book, about how they've been attacked using political instruments and the law illegally, and how many have lost their fortunes due to that, and generally talking about the way the system is rigged against the individual, and other things based on Ayn Rand's philosophy. But you'll have to read it to see.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. Yeah, so I did a Google search. Everyone tuning in, if you're listening on the podcast or through one of our video channels, you can Google "Avoiding Death and Taxes." It'll come up pretty quickly. By Eugene Friedman, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so that's his other name. So please check that out. I'm interested to read it, and I'm going to do that right away. I'm going to order me a copy today. So tell us a little bit more too. I have some websites listed below on the screen. ntlwealth.com, which is that's the practice, I guess, based out of Panama.
Yeah, actually, the law firm is in Panama. It's called Mundo Lawyers. It's a family office law firm. The firm that is NTL Wealth is, of which I'm also CEO, is an international firm dealing basically in second citizenship. It's one of the top in the Russian market and growing in Latin America, and we're very much interested in working with Americans. We've had more and more Americans coming. Before, Americans thought it was crazy to have a second citizenship. They didn't understand that America is no longer America, nor the ideals are no longer the ideals. So we have an office in St. Kitts and Nevis, one of the oldest offices there, with our own legal team for trusts and asset protection and passports. We have our own teams all over the Caribbean, one of the oldest companies in the Caribbean for second passports, and we do second passports in other jurisdictions through our co-partnered firms. And basically, we structure wealth. So we specialize in the creation of family offices. So Mundo is our portal, which is a family office type of club, which teaches people in a way how to structure and how to invest in a non-traditional method. For example, just a simple example, your usual financial advisor will tell you if you get 1% a year, it's going to be great. We have, for example, a bond backed by gold in Panama from a family office that buys gold. He buys it in futures and secures it with the bond. In other words, he uses the cash flow, paying 8% a year fixed in American currency by gold. That's just one. We have IPOs, which pre-IPOs, which have potential, huge potential. We have funds. We have real estate investment in Panama, where you can buy an apartment in the center of the city for $115,000 with only 30% down, and over 5 years by the developer. So what we do is we teach our clients basically how to structure themselves legally. So far, I mean, the world is trying to make any wealth illegal as we speak, but so far legally, and how to structure themselves in a way that they become a perpetual family office. And I can tell you about that if you like. I mean, it's yeah.
I mean, all this stuff is very interesting and I think unique to the podcast here. So I appreciate you sharing what you know and what you're doing. I think it's all very interesting stuff. And I think from an American standpoint, I don't think I know anyone that has, another passport. How common is that in other countries for everyone listening?
Without saying too much, although what I'm saying is probably saying too much already, most of the wealthiest people in the world have second passports simply because they're politically exposed. In other words, when you're wealthy, you'll be attacked. Let's take something that everybody vilifies, the Communist Party in China, right? No, I mean, everybody understands. It simply works like this. If you're a member of the Communist Party in China and you don't, you get out of favor with one of the people in your party who's more powerful than you, he'll have you executed and sell your organs on the open market. It's as simple as that. Now, for them, a second passport is a life insurance policy. If you're in any country which is considered a dictatorship, a second passport basically is an insurance policy of what happens, because the government can basically freeze your passport, take it away, stop you for any reason. Usually they use reasons like you haven't paid tax because you had a cup of coffee 20 years ago, which you didn't declare, right?
So
and
they can make up any reason, pretty much, right?
And they do, yeah. Now, that technology is used by all governments. All governments are the same, in my view, without saying more. It's the same technology. It's just written in a different ink, red or white or black. Yeah. So that's why a second passport, in short, is that's why many of them buy second passports, simply because they're scared of what could happen to them for being perfectly legal. I mean, you look at Jack Ma and the tax by the Chinese government on him, and you look at all the Chinese, billionaires that have fallen out of favor. Some have escaped. That's why many of the Chinese go to America. They're afraid of. But this is not just the Chinese thing, right? It's worldwide.
That's interesting, but I mean, that makes a lot of sense. If I was in that situation, I would do what I could to have a plan. Well, what do you call it, like a plan B, right?
Yeah, we call it a plan B, basically, which in most the problem is that now, and you can see the division in politics, for example, in America. I mean, you can see what is alleged by followers of Trump, and I actually believe that there's been a lot of rigging of. Now, when you talk about illegalities happening in a country which pretends to be democratic, the rest of the countries just don't stand a chance. So it's everywhere. I mean, the fact is that, if and you've seen it in America, for example, in the 1950s, practitioners of medicine who practiced herbal medicine were attacked and put in prison because of what we call the medical mafia. That's a known fact. It's and we're talking about just simple doctors who simply were trying to cure conditions like cancer. And then the courts eventually accepted that was wrong. But that was a whole resetting of the medical model in America. Now it's totally pharmaceutical. Before it was herbal, and it changed in around the 50s. That's in my book as well. But
I can't wait to check the book out.
Yeah. So there are things that we're not being told about. For example, you can also say that there's a lot of technologies out there, including medical technologies, that are disruptive. In other words, they go against the current monopolies, and the patents are bought by these companies and hidden away. When we talk about that and we talk about the power of government, I mean, in America, if you're actually prosecuted for something, or anywhere, your chance of actually defending yourself is less than zero. There's a famous story of a bank in America, for example. 2008 crisis was considered by the FBI as fraudulent. In other words, many of the banks issued fraudulent credit. Now, none of them were prosecuted except for one small family bank owned by the Chinese. I forget in which state. They threw like $10 million in funds against that bank for fraud, when all it did was issue credit based on normal practices. Now, the other banks were saved by money.
Someone had to go down.
Yeah, someone had to go down. So again, if you have to go down, if anyone can go down, having a plan B, asset protection. And this is not just, let's look at the ordinary situation of a creditor. Now, if you are in America, if you are in a partnership with anybody, or if you have any type of business, they can sue you for anything. We talk about, for example, there are cases in America where a robber was granted a claim for slipping in
Yeah.
a house he robbed, right? So in that type of, I mean, it's
Insane.
nuts. But in that type of litigation strategy with contingency fees being the mode, having an asset protection structure offshore is absolutely essential. Not to mention, divorce, where the spouse can basically make up anything he or she wants and have all your assets frozen forever. Now, all of that means that, it's like basically having an insurance policy for medicine. It's essential to have like a trust or an asset protection for yourself and the family, so that's what we specialize in, basically.
Well, I mean, really, really fascinating for me, and hopefully for some of the guests listening as well. I would think. I was talking. So your book again, avoid death and taxes.
Death and taxes.
Yes, and I was talking to him as well, Evgeny as well. There's another book, which if you're interested, and anyone listening, but is the Creature from Jekyll Island, which really goes into a lot of detail about the Federal Reserve and how that was all orchestrated. And that's another fascinating book that I think is worth checking out, whether or not you end up believing it or not. But it's some things you gotta think about, and what's really going on in the world and with the governments. So I appreciate you sharing all this.
It's a beautiful work, the creature from Jekyll Island. But it's interesting. I don't know whether it's in the book, but I think 3 of American presidents have been linked to their assassinations, have been linked to their attempt to stop the Fed and to create, their own reserve, as it were. So there's a lot of
not a good idea.
A lot of information about that. But some fascinating stuff, and should be read by everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I think draw your own conclusion, of course, but definitely worth taking a look. I'm going to definitely check out your book. So I wanted to ask you too a little bit more about the in Panama. You said that there's a city, the private city, first of its kind potentially. So give us a little more information. Yeah, more information about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've partnered with some of Panama's top family offices to create. We have the land, which is 1,500 hectares of land, which is quite a large bit of land on the beach, right beside one of the best areas in Panama, 1.5 hours to the city with its own airport.
Sounds nice.
Everything else. The city will be unique, and it'll be a private city. There'll be a lot of developments in that. For example, we've partnered with a number of institutes which are creating disease-free buildings using technology that they've developed, which was a doomsday military scenario long ago, but that technology was never used. Now actual, because now with COVID and other viruses, this is only the beginning in our view of what's going to happen. Any idiot with a virus bottle can actually release deadly, very much easier than any nuclear threat. So we have that. We have the technology for those buildings. We have new technology. It's $1 billion fund which has created new technology using sea waves, windmills, and
power
and solar to create basically almost free power. We have a company which is now going to be floated on exchange, which is by water from the bottom of the ocean, and we have new technology which we have in its been developed, the prototype, which is turning human waste into pure water and fertilizer. Now, so that's just part of the technologies we have, but the whole city is going, So the whole city is going to be based on Panama's existing legal technology, which is the free zone laws, which grants virtually tax-free exit and entry of goods, no taxation on worldwide income, the right to issue no there's no limitation on crypto issuing or cryptocurrencies. So we also have a family office which will hold the investment in pure gold. In other words, the investors will be able to invest in a gold fund to hold the investment pending the development of the city as a guarantee. So we've covered many of the bases. The project is at its first stage round of financing, which hasn't started yet, but it's everything is in place. We've got all the players, all the teams in place to begin, and the land, of course, which is the key. So, yeah,
that's incredible. Did you say 1,000 acres?
1,500 hectares.
1,500 acres. Okay.
1 hectare is 4 acres, so it's the size of a city.
That's amazing. So, I guess first question in my mind is, how do you participate? How do you become part of this private city?
Well, we'll release that next. There's 2 levels. First of all, we're going to have family offices who are going to buy a stake in the whole city. Now, the difference between that city and any other development, it's going to be a trading entity. In other words, the city will also own technology and be able to trade in various. The whole city will also farms of fish farming, because this is in a fish farming area, one of the top in the world. There'll be also organic farming. The city will have a constitution which will ban all things that are bad for humankind, including GMOs. So everything in the city will actually enhance human health. The family offices will invest a stake in the purchase of the first round, which will be the building of the infrastructure, and which will be the purchase of the land. So they will own the land and the infrastructure. They'll own the city. The second round to the public will be, and again, not everyone will be able to participate, will be the issue. Sorry?
I said I would assume. That's what I was wondering, from what's that look like. So
the idea of the city is not new. It was actually established in a book which is very famous, of course, Ayn Rand, who wrote about Galt's Gulch, and there have been various attempts to create it over time in recent years, and they're only beginning. We expect many cities to pop up around the world like this. Panama just happens to be a really good place to do it, simply because of the fact that private cities are quite accepted in Panama. Large blocks of land are owned by families. There's no real interference. There's no problems with that. No one considers that a unique concept. So what we're doing is not radical in that sense.
Gotcha.
In some places, it would not be allowed. So
I assume America would be one of those.
Quite possibly, yes. Yeah,
I can't even build a deck in my backyard without getting approval. So
exactly. Well, there the city will the government is actually supporting us so far. We've talked to them at the highest level, and they're very interested because it'll put Panama on the map. It'll bring, the project is worth over 30 billion, so it'll bring a lot of resources to Panama. But also the idea is to connect the world's wealthiest people with the world's smartest people in a community which will incubate the energy that America was supposed to have been long ago. The whole idea of America as a free, libertarian, constitutionally based country, which was, an idea, is possible, in my view, only with a small community of something like 100,000 people that more or less can interact and know with each other and are selected. So there's no division between, for example, I'm totally opposed to the concept of socialism or communism, and so will the city, because unfortunately that what I call a mental disease, which is socialism and communism, is now spread throughout the world. And so cities like this are the antidote, because if you look at what Ayn Rand writes in her book, in Atlas Shrugged, she basically says if you put 1% of the population actually does something and 99% are parasites, the population will die. the structure will die. And she predicts the collapse of America in Atlas Shrugged. And she wrote that she was actually a Russian Jewish immigrant. And she wrote that, I think it was in the 50s when she wrote, don't quote me, it could have been earlier. So it's very interesting that what she wrote is now actually happening, you know, with basically the smartest people being taxed to death and their ability for trying to do something, you know. So people are now understanding that, you know, they want to be able to produce their own labor. And by the way, another aspect of the free city, because I'm very much have been a proponent of indigenous rights. I believe the indigenous people of the world have had their land stolen and their culture destroyed. One part of the city will be reserved for the indigenous tribes of Panama to actually be protectors of the land. In other words, to grow their own medicinal plants, to grow other cultures, and to actually participate in the preservation of the city as a preservation of the nature of the city, because we've screwed up our world as well. You know, there's so much plastic in the ocean now. One of my friends who's going to be on the board, he dives with great white sharks, and without a suit, without a tank.
Without nothing.
Yeah. And he believes, you know, he's very much into preservation of the ocean. There are actually islands of plastic in the ocean now, bigger than normal. Don't break down. And if we don't start doing something, we're going to destroy the world, and there's nowhere else. We're not going to get to Mars anytime soon.
Elon Musk is not going to save us.
Yeah, no. Well, if he does, he'll only save 1% of the richest people who he'll take with him and leave the rest of us to die.
Him and Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another reason why I'm so passionate about this, because I believe that if we create enough cities like this, we'll be able to literally save the world. It's like an ark in a way, because if we ban all the things that are harmful to the environment and to human health in our own, and that takes off worldwide, and we create enough space, we preserve enough human rights, we'll be able to possibly save mankind, because I don't see any other solution. It's certainly not a political one.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Evgeny, I think, you know, what you're up to and what you're doing, and how what's the right word? I guess driven, motivated, active you are. I think it's just amazing. I think you know, I think everyone that's tuning in, definitely check out his websites, ntlwealth.com or mundo.expert. So it's not .com, it's mundo.expert, to learn more about him. And yeah, I appreciate you really just sharing your story. So you're not just managing a law firm and practicing law, but there's so much more that you're up to and that you're doing, which I think is really interesting. And I think people should tune in and learn more about what you're up to. What's the best way if someone wanted to connect with you or find out more about this private city? What's the best way for them to do some more research or connect with you?
My email is ceo@ntlwealth.com. Yeah, and that'd be great to receive emails there. So, yeah. Okay,
so ceo@ntlwealth.com.
Yep.
Reach out to and give it. Yeah, again, I just think your story is so unique and different, and you know, traveling the world, doing amazing things. I think it's all very intriguing. I want to check out your book. I'm definitely going to order that and read that as soon as I can. So that's going to be on my list. I trying to read 2 books or more a month. So that's going to go in my library right away. But I'll push it to the front. So I can.
I'd love your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely.
Really appreciate there's some interesting stuff in there in terms of the facts, and I'd love you to actually play the devil's advocate and see. It'll be interesting, but it's quite controversial. So
Well, one of the things, I mean, so I look at the cover of the book and I see you have Bitcoin kind of in the cover.
Yeah,
So
crypto.
yeah, crypto. So real quick before we tune out on this episode, thoughts on what El Salvador has done with going to Bitcoin as their currency.
I mean, basically, this is in the last chapter, but I talk about that throughout the book. I mean, essentially, it's this, and a lot of economists have been saying that, and it's a basic fact. No fiat currency has ever survived. I mean, the one that survived the longest was probably the Roman coin, and that too collapsed. And the only things that have ever survived throughout history as a form of money has been gold and silver. And the reason for that is it's very hard to produce it quickly, and everyone believes in it. Now, as soon as people lose their belief in a currency, it collapses because it's not backed by anything. You know, the American dollar, the biggest debt in the world is, as we all know, is by America. So the minute people lose their faith, and that takes a second, as we see in the Great Depression, the economy will collapse. But not only that, so will the country, so will various parts of it. So it's quite the creation of new currencies and crypto is actually an evolution of finance. People have now understood that the governments created money out of nothing. They can do the same. Now governments are trying to stop them, obviously.
China's already banned it.
Yeah, they want to have the monopoly on that. Now, eventually, that won't stick, because what is now happening is blockchain allows you to have what's called the DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. You don't need a central power to tell you how to trade. You can have smart contracts. So, in other words, if I trade with you, I can track the trade and I can enforce my rights. I don't need a government, a law firm, a system.
An international bank, or nobody.
Exactly. So people will be able to go back to the way they used to trade in tribal societies with each other, but using blockchain. And then the role of centralized authorities will end. Now, that's an evolutionary thing. Obviously, between that, there'll be wars, attacks, attacks on freedom. But in the end, it's just not productive, because when you use a bank, you pay something like, if you put all your transaction fees, you can pay up to 4% of the transaction in fees. Whereas if you use the blockchain and your own currency, you have almost no fees. Now, in the end, the banks are also collapsing to fintech. So that's why the people that are creating their own now, let's say communities using things like ICOs, although that's no longer a popular word, but coins, are now creating exchanges based on themselves. They don't need anybody else. So and that'll grow, in my opinion. And when it's banned, people will just move to the places where it's not. So it's a So that's why that's on the cover of the book. But there's more to it than that. Yeah.
Do you personally invest in crypto?
Yes. However, there is a downside to crypto, is that no one will know which crypto will survive.
There's just so many options right now. I got money in a handful, but it's kind of the wild, wild west right now.
Yeah, it's the new does survive. The people in that will have thousands and thousands, and it may be a new technology based on that. But certainly within that, there'll be waves of attack, like taxation, prohibitions. The fact that El Salvador has adopted it is not a good thing for crypto, for the reason of one has to understand what El Salvador is, and I wouldn't like to say that on a public broadcast. So
yeah, no, it didn't help Bitcoin, and it only crashed, went down, and it seems like it's, well, they're basically they're forcing people to use it too, right? I mean, it's not the way to do it.
Well, I mean, it's sadly going to be a very bad blow to the reputation of Bitcoin, because then it'll allow the regulators to play their card of excuse, saying, oh, well, this is linked to criminal organizations and now we're going to ban it all. And sadly, that is the danger. That's the card they'll play. Of course, the dollar in cash is actually much worse as a system of exchange for criminals than Bitcoin, but they don't talk about that. So
yeah,
but that's another story.
It's another story. We'll have to have another episode to cover all that. Well, I just appreciate you sharing everything so that you have shared. And again, I know we could probably talk all day. But for the purpose of the episode and everyone listening, I hope you've enjoyed what Evgeny's had to share. And I know it's a lot. So, feel free to listen to this again. Check out his book. Check out what he's up to. Check out the websites that I had shared, and we'll post those out as well. But interesting stuff, man. I really appreciate you sharing. And again, coming from Moscow, when are you traveling back to Panama?
Probably in about 6 weeks or so.
Okay. So this man's all over the place. So, well, have a safe trip when you go back. Me and you will chat after this. Just stay on with me. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you have picked up some interesting things. I got a couple books that you should check out. Again, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and Avoid Death and Taxes. By our friend here. Avoiding Death and Taxes. So Google that. It comes right up. Check that out. I'm going to go get a copy right now. Everyone for tuning in, thanks so much. We will have this featured episode up on our website, arraylaw.com/podcast. It'll also be up audio version as soon as we get it edited up on all the podcasting platforms. So be sure to check that out. And that's it. So if everyone needs any help with digital marketing, you're a law firm trying to do amazing things like our friend here, please reach out. We can help you, whether or not it's directly or just answering questions. We're happy to help any way we can. Go to Array. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Arraylaw.com. That's it. Evgeny, anything else you want to say before we go?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for having me on, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too. Again, amazing story, amazing things. And look forward to talking to you more. And everyone else, have a great day.